Welcome to the Sawyer On Water podcast. This is a podcast where we discuss everything human-powered on water, rivers, lakes, and oceans mostly. Today we are having a conversation with Renee Anderson, aka Wild Oregon Girl, and this is a collaboration kicking off our Heartbeat of the River series. And of course, we are starting with the Rogue River in this series. The Rogue River is right here in our backyard. It is very fond and dear to many of us. And it's actually a river that has many usages. You know, it provides a very active fishing season in the spring and in the fall, whitewater rafting, kayaking, and stand-up paddleboarding. A few of the main highlights on the Rogue here in Southern Oregon are Nugget and Powerhouse, which are right outside of Gold Hill, and that's a little half-day run that a lot of commercial groups run. And then probably most known for is the Wild and Scenic trip, the wilderness section of the Rogue River, which is anywhere from a 3 to 5 day trip. And one of the noteworthy pieces of the Lower Rogue is that there are wilderness lodges along the way that have been there, kind of grandfathered in since the Wild and Scenic designation. And you can actually do a 4-day river trip and sleep in a riverside lodge every night, which is quite a treat. So enjoy this discussion with Renee Anderson on the Rogue River.
All right, we are back on the water. Zac, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of the Rogue River?
First thing that comes to mind when I think of the Rogue River is where it originates. It's literally coming out of the Cascades in the Crater Lake region. You know, it's a pretty phenomenal watershed of just how many miles of recreational water there is on the Rogue.
So someone's never seen this river before. How would you describe it?
I would describe it really as what I would be a recreational river, great for beginners, with a little bit of excitement, able to keep the attention of all experienced boaters, depending on the section you grab. And like every river, it has a lot of characteristics. You know, there's times where we're in really mellow water and we're running the drift boat and fishing. And there's other times where, you know, there's pretty big water and you're running the raft and you're wearing a life jacket and a helmet because it's bounces you around a bit. So, you know, we get all those characteristics. And the Rogue has, you know, probably 8 to 10 significant put-ins that are all really class 1 to 2, 2+ floats. And that's pretty amazing to have a river system have that much access. As we saw today, you know, we had power boaters that were on the river. There's drift boats, there's kayaks, there's rafts. So it's definitely, waterways are for multiple use.
Would you say that makes it unique from other rivers, or what makes the Rogue so legendary?
I think what makes the Rogue so legendary and popular with folks is that it's been a recreational river for so long. Mm-hmm. You go back to, you know, the Zen Gray days and back to Glenn Wooldridge. You know, these were people that were pioneering on this river back in the, you know, in the 40s and 50s, you know. So it's been an actual destination for a long time, and this little valley has grown up around it, and it's been able to, you know, sustain being still fairly clean for a river system that goes through a populace. You know, out east, unfortunately, a lot of rivers, there's you know, too much pollution where they start going near cities and factories and all that, where the Rogue is, you know, it's 252 miles, plenty of plenty of time to get clean.
What do you think it is about the landscape here that really shapes the way you boat here?
Well, the river has to be your guide. The river dictates what you're going to do. So that goes right back into the know before you go. You need to know what stretch you're on. And the run that you did with Rogue Rafting, there's always a couple people in the summertime that just happenstance onto that run, thinking that they're on one of those mellower class 2 runs, and all of a sudden, they're like, I just remember one time when I was guiding down there, we were set up taking pictures, running several boats through, and there's a guy and a gal come cruising through there. She's in the front of the boat and she is reading a magazine and no life jacket on. And all of a sudden I see her pull the magazine down and you see her eyes just get big as frisbees as they go in, and they just have a total yard sale. Luckily the commercial crew was there, so we basically picked him up, bailed him out, pulled him in, or we pulled her in, and he floated down around the corner to the other side. And so when we got her over to the shore, we're just like, hey, our trip's gonna be moving on here in just a minute, why don't you just sit over here, warm up, and we'll boat you on down there to your boyfriend. And she looks at us and she's like, he is not my boyfriend, and I am done right here.
Oh,
Do you have a vehicle? So I believe our shuttle driver drove her to town.
Oh, yeah. That is quite the story. I mean, the Rogue, it's an important place for Oregonians. You maybe you make up on it. Why do you think the Rogue is so important for all Oregonians, though?
Well, I mean, I would say the Rogue is important for all Oregonians because it is an economic driver. Multiple entities have figured out ways to generate revenue on it. And it's all basically what you would classify as ecotourism. It's all either fishing, rafting, kayaking, rentals. There's places on the Rogue that we can go sub paddling and just have it has the same characteristics as a lake. Mm-hmm. And there are places on the Rogue where there are no power boats. So it's definitely the diversity and the cleanliness is probably the two main things where it's been a gem for many years, and it's just a huge resource for the Rogue Valley all the way through.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the gear. How does Sawyer gear show up out here on the Rogue?
Well, right now I'm rowing one of our premier oars. This is a square top, which it is one piece of wood from the tip of the handle to the tip of the blades. And that is one of those things that you just cannot replicate if you're going to put a junction in. Cody has a nice wood blade on his oars, but he has a junction. So there is a dissipation of energy in every place you have a junction. So the flex and feel of wood is not just a slogan, it is a real thing. And if you really load into a square top, you can actually see that flex and then that rebound pop. So, utilizing wood and composites has really been what has kind of moved Sawyer into the existing times that we're in now, and literally making a very high performance oar that the foundation is still wood.
Mm-hmm. So you've seen a lot of different ways that people have boated the river, since the 1940s, you said. How has Sawyer been a part of that evolution?
Well, the biggest thing is that when Ralph Sawyer started the company back in 1967, he was building paddles. He was a canoe builder and was shifting away from his brother back east. And as he started building paddles, he had a very persistent Billy Illingsworth that just was starting Willie drift boats and really needed oars. And it was really by the mere fact that Illingsworth would not let it go that Ralph finally caved in, lucky for all of us,
that Ralph finally caved in and said, all right, I'll build you some oars. And Willie's thing was like, hey, you're building a paddle. How different can it be? Just make it, make it 9 feet long and a little bigger, and we're good to go. But that was one of those things, a paddle is usually laid up and worked up on fairly smaller machinery. We had to, started with the smoker lathe, which was pretty much one of the older lathes that we have. And then eventually we had the smoker and Sawyer lathe. And one basically does really long shafts, and one does the shorter stuff. And that was pretty much history being made. And now the oars that we made for Willie are still produced to this day. And we've been making oars in various layups ever since.
And a mass-produced oar it isn't comparable, is it?
No, you can't really just spit these out of a Pez dispenser, as we say. If you're gonna lay up the wood, you have to spin the wood, and then there's a lot of hand sanding that goes into play as far as with horizontal sanders, various belt sanders, and then we pretty much put carbon and fiberglass on them to try and still keep the oar really light but high performance.
So it really is, going back to that history, the story, the connection. I know you told us one funny story about the yard sale couple, but is there a favorite story that you have? Maybe like a quiet moment?
Oh, I would say that when you get out on a multi-day and can absolutely just kind of unplug for quite a few days, Gail and I will actually do a multi-day with just the two of us and the dog. And you're on your own pace. And just having that time and having those evenings on the river. There's something about a river when the sun goes down, it's like those couple hours before dusk or before the darkness, and then those few hours first thing in the morning, the river is always very magical. And a lot of it is that for me, you do get to completely unplug. Like you really, I don't think about what's going on with my emails and my texts when I'm on the river, and I used to always joke about that when I was guiding, because I would orient all the families. And so we would have these group of 22 people, and it's kind of this, you have to give them all the information for the trip, but it's kind of like, I took it on, it's kind of like a stand-up act. You just got to keep them entertained, you got to keep them engaged on it. And so then we would always get into, cameras and electronics and everything, and I would tell the group straight up, it's like, this is a electronic-free zone. You cannot have electronics in the Rogue Canyon. They do not exist. It'll ruin them. And so if you have electronics with you, kids, you just got to leave those behind. And then we would get down on the trip, and mom and dad would be pulling out their cell phone, taking pictures, and the kid would be like, hey, I thought this was a electronic free zone. I'm like, well, we plug those into the current bush. They're okay. And you just kind of play them on for a while, and you got a couple days to go. So you just kind of want to see how long it takes for them to really start to figure it out. It's like, oh, I see. You just put some rules in place that I was playing along with. And now I know that I could have brought my little electronic, but my mom and dad didn't want me to, and they were able to bring their phone to take pictures. But, it's just little things like that where, I actually had the pleasure of actually taking my kids on the water as they were really young. Mm-hmm. On the recreation stretch, able to get them out on the water when they were just a couple of years old, and then on the wild and scenic stretch, each one of my boys got to go down the wild and scenic when they were 5. And it was just because they were with me. A lot of commercial companies don't allow you to go down at that age, but I felt comfortable with it. And I remember pulling the kids out of the tent, still in their pajamas, giving them their cocoa in their sippy cups and putting their life jackets on and say, all right, get in the boat. We got to get an early out here today. And they're, still sleepy-eyed. But as long as they got their sippy cup and their hot cocoa, they're good to go. And, you know, their PJs will get a little wet, but it's going to be all right.
Yeah, I mean, it really is about those future generations, right? Like,
Absolutely.
we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for river runners before us. So what do you think the Rogue has to teach the future generations?
I think it really just, people need to realize that it's a resource. You know, like rivers are a resource, and it really lends itself to quality of life. And so like you want to really cherish those resources. You know, every river community has a community around it that really is protecting it and supporting it. And that's the thing, is like you have to protect the resource. And the sooner you get your kids out and get them on the river, the easier it is for them to understand that, because they're going to be the ones that are going to be protecting it. You know, they're going to be the ones that have to deal with issues that, just like how we sprawl up into the mountains and we move into habitats of animals. Well, the same thing. It's like we still want to have growth, but we want to have clean rivers as well. And there's got to be a give and take. There's got to be, you know, meet us halfway, you know, meet us in the middle. Compromise is very important.
Yeah, my family took me out when I was a kid. My family built drift boats and took me out there, and that's why I'm here today. And we're going to be going down to the Klamath tomorrow and looking at this dam removal project. But that happened here on the Rogue first, right?
Yep, absolutely. So the dam removal on the Rogue was supposed to be a 3-year process. The first one came out down right above Powerhouse Rapids. So in between Nugget and Powerhouse, there was a low overhead dam there. You probably can look back at historic pictures and you can see these dams. We used to go over it commercially. It used to be part of the trip. And we just figured out where we could actually run this low overhead dam. And as a general rule, you don't run those, but we figured out where we could actually run them. And then that was the first one that came out. Then they actually took Gold Ray out, which is where we're going to float through. And that one actually was planned. It was coming out in the fall, and it actually breached. And so if you look back in the archive, there's footage of a huge front end loader crane in the middle of the river, because there's channels of free-flowing river going on both sides of it.
Oh, man.
And then the last one they took out was Savage Rapid. And the river became free-flowing from that point, from Lost Creek all the way down. So Lost Creek Lake is still there. That is pretty much a flood-resistant lake to really protect the town. And even with that there, I mean, there's people that live in Central Point right off of I-5, and they have flooding in, you know, the big floods of 97, big floods of 205. You know, I mean, every time the river floods, about every 10 years, you know, the real historic marker floods are like 64, 74, 83, 97. You know, those are substantial. And rivers have that ability, especially if they're, you know, 300 miles long.
Yeah, so we really need keepers of the knowledge of the river.
Right. And support your local river organizations. You know, most rivers have actual chapters of river keepers. And, you know, your river keepers are doing just that. They're basically trying to protect that resource for us all to use and protecting the waterways.
And Sawyer fits right into that.
Absolutely. We have actually an artisan oar, is an oar with a cause, where actually 5% of every oar sale goes towards primarily protecting rivers and river fisheries. And we kind of moved from different organizations after a couple of years. We usually stay with an organization for 2 or 3 years, and they get full benefit from our sales. And you know, right now there's a lot of focus on rivers in Idaho, where they want to undam the Snake. And so, you know, there's a lot of press behind that. There's a lot of politics in it. You know, you're talking multiple states, and that was the thing with the Klamath, where, you know, dealing with 2 different states, several different federal agencies, state agencies, and I don't know exactly, but maybe 5 to 8 different tribes. I mean, that's just a full-on hot potato.
It is, but we can look to what's done here in Oregon and Northern California and use that as a blueprint for what can be done elsewhere.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it was, and these were like on the Rogue, it was low overhead dams, and so the Klamath really went to the next level of taking out reservoirs and putting rivers back to their native state.
Yeah, which is culturally important and very important to the wildlife.
Absolutely.
I'm sure
and it's something that takes time.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of political heat on that whole Klamath pit because everybody's watching, everybody's paying attention because there's a lot of stakeholders, and every time you have more stakeholders, the more it is watched and the more it is discussed in open forums and public forums, and that's the thing, everybody needs to remember that it's not about just your cause. It's all a compromise to make it work.
Yeah, for the greater good.
For the greater good, and it's going to take quite a while for a river system where you remove a bunch of reservoirs to come back into play.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's substantial, for sure.
But it's a way we can all come together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you don't have to be the best buddies of somebody to share the same river stretch.
Right.
Maybe if you're doing a multi-day trip and you're camping together, you may want to be all on the same page. But in general, you don't have to be really, there's all walks of life. Enjoy the river.
Yeah, water is for everyone. Water sustains all life.
Yeah, it's the common denominator, for sure.
It is. Is there anything else you want to add about Rogue and Sawyer and why we're out here today?
Well, we're out here because it is kind of right prior to Memorial Day weekend. This is kind of the unofficial kickoff of river season. Mm-hmm. And so we really just want to remind people to kind of practice good boating techniques and skills and really kind of know before you go, know the river stretch you're on, and really in the springtime, know the levels.
Yeah.
Because the river that you're used to in July may be totally different in May. It might be a completely different beast.
Yep.
So that's really, really important, I think, to just kind of be aware of the rivers around you. And, there's a lot of good forums. There's a lot of good gauge reading websites where you can really get an actual flow. And one of the things that I find that's really important is if you're going to run a river on a weekend, is just check out that flow on Monday and watch it throughout the week so you see what it's doing. So if it's actually coming up or going down, and just kind of get that reference feel for it. And then also, if you're taking somebody new, mm-hmm. you need to be aware that they are trying to follow you. And just like if you're driving through town and you lose somebody at a stoplight, it's the same thing. If you are showing them the lines, you need to actually be considerate and show them the lines.
Yeah. Don't drive too fast.
People just take off and, running down the river, and it's no, you were actually showing your buddy. Where's your buddy? Oh, he's over there in the rocks. He didn't follow me. So one of the big things is always in the rivers is you point positive. Mm-hmm. What that means is you point to where you want to go. You don't point negative. You don't point at the thing you want to avoid, because if you're pointing at something, people are like, oh, I should go there. So you point positive and give, good, clean, clear instructions of where you want people to go.
Really a lesson in communication and teamwork.
Absolutely.
And trust.
And so right here, this is where Gold Ray Dam was.
Okay.
This is what used to be the dam. There used to be, it was maybe 20 feet or so. And, it was definitely a significant thing that everybody knew. You couldn't actually float the stretch that we just floated because there was a dam there.
But you can float it now.
And you can float it now.
Yeah.
You can float it all the way from the hatchery down.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sawyer On Water podcast. This is just a kickoff of our Heartbeat of the River series and kind of a sampling of what we're intending to do here throughout the summer is getting out on the water, doing some interviews with various folks and on various rivers. So if you like this podcast, please tell a friend, tell a family, tell other boaters you know, share this with anyone you can. And if you'd like more information on anything that we discussed or anything Sawyer related, please check out our website at paddlesandoars.com. We'll see you next time. Remember, be calm, be patient, and we'll see you on the river.